This video is about feelings and emotions. Emotive energy is an integrated model of the brain, mind, and emotions, and it incorporates a wide variety of other models, including models for humanism, behaviorism, psychodynamic theory, and many, many more. To understand emotive energy, we must first understand feelings and emotions. To do that, I'm going to have an example with a couple of critters that are found in Africa, lions and Thompson gazelles, and they're found at the foot of Mount Kilimanjaro. Feelings and emotions are tied to blood flow, and as blood flow changes, feelings and emotions change too. Now, for this sleeping lion, it has a balanced blood flow. Every part of its body is getting fed nourishment. And similarly, the gazelle is also in a balanced blood flow. And that balanced blood flow is referred to as homeostasis. And it's basically controlled by the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, another easier term instead of homeostasis and parasympathetic nervous system is simply rest and digest. It's a term that is very convenient for expressing this state of balanced blood flow, and balance feels good. So we're thinking that that lion and the gazelle at this situation are feeling just fine. But unfortunately, change is inevitable, and if some fluffy clouds come overhead, one of the problems with such clouds is they turn into thunderstorms. And with the lightning and thunder, that lion is going to wake up. And once the lion wakes up, the gazelle is going to be more vigilant. So that lion is probably going to be hungry upon awakening, and he's going to start looking for something to eat. And that gazelle, being on the menu for lions, it's suddenly going to be fearful. And one of the key elements of what's going on is urgency. That lion needs to eat and that gazelle needs to get away. So both of these states, hunger and fear, are stressful states of life. And those are controlled by the sympathetic nervous system. And the phrase for that is fight or flight, which was coined, like homeostasis, it was coined by Walter Cannon. So with our critters in hunger and fear, these are feelings. We feel hunger, we feel fearful. But the question is, are they emotions? And for fear, yes, most authorities would say that's an emotion. But hunger, not so much. However, emotive energy sticks with one term for both because they both have a common element in directing blood flow. And that is the feeling that's involved here. Feelings are always changes in blood flow. So what blood flow changes are happening? Well, blood is being redirected toward the limbs. And that's supported by biologist Bruce Lipton. And he said stress hormones, which comes from sympathetic nervous system, it forces the blood to the arms and legs. And similarly, Dr. Galloway said in flight response, blood is diverted more to the legs in preparation for running. And there are other resources that I have not bothered to include here. So the blood flow is being redirected to the limbs during hunger and fear, both stressful states of life. And that stress, with the blood flow being redirected, it becomes an imbalanced blood flow. So stressful states are imbalanced blood flows. For the hungry lion, it has an empty feeling in its stomach, and for the scared little gazelle, it's probably got a sinking feeling in the stomach. Of course, these animals can't talk to us, but we're all mammals. And as a result, we would expect there to be similarities in feelings. All right, so with that change in blood flow, what gets sacrificed? Well, first and foremost, digestion. As blood is diverted from the torso, there's a loss in blood to support digestion and supporting that portion of the torso. But another more subtle and not as obvious change is that the immune system is getting sacrificed. And that was shown by a study back in 1989 by Alan Rechthofen, Carol Everson, and Bernard Bergman. They had rats which they kept wide awake and would not allow to sleep. And after about 2 weeks, the rats died. And it was consistent. Their term is that sleep deprivation was uniformly fatal to rats. So obviously, something was stressful. Staying awake, just as is, was stressful. But the question arose, what killed the rats? And it appears that only Carol Everson wanted to track that down. So she turned around and reperformed the study with her colleague, Linda Toth. And sure enough, the rats died. But the change to find out what killed them, they did an autopsy. And in the autopsy, they found a pathogen, whether it be a bacteria or a virus or something else. Something was in the gut of the rat that killed it. It eventually took hold. And that was consistent. Over and over again, the rats died, as in the first study, and they would find a pathogen. But the pathogen was not the same each time. And it doesn't matter what the pathogen was. Something took hold eventually and killed the rats. So their conclusion was there was an impaired host defense. Well, what does that mean? Well, host defense is your immune system. Your immune system is supposed to protect you from pathogens. So basically it says the immune system had been degraded, compromised by the lack of sleep. Okay, conclusions of Everson and Toth are consistent with other research. Leptin, again, adrenal hormones, which is the sympathetic nervous system, repress the action of the immune system. And the American Psychological Association agrees, says the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system have powerful interactions with the immune system. Now let's take another creature. How about a dolphin? Now what's different is the dolphins can't pull over to an island and sleep on shore. They've got to come to the surface all the time to breathe. So do they sleep? What about the dolphins and the porpoises? Well, that's a good question. As it turns out, there was a study done, and dolphins, like humans, have two hemispheres to their brains. They have a right hemisphere and a left hemisphere. And during their sleep cycle, I should say, in their dormant or slow down period, one half of the brain, one hemisphere was wide awake, and it's awake enough, I shouldn't say wide awake, it was awake enough to bring the dolphin to the surface to breathe. And the other hemisphere was basically put to sleep. And during their dormant period, periodically, that would switch. The hemisphere that was asleep would be awakened to keep the dolphin coming to the surface to breathe, and the other hemisphere, which had been awake, is put to sleep. And that would be done over and over again throughout the period of being dormant. So did the dolphin sleep? Yeah, sort of. It was an unusual form of sleep that we don't ourselves experience, but it was nonetheless, it was sleep. So back to our critters, our hungry lion and scared little Thompson's gazelle. They're in stress right now. And these are stressful systems are basically fight or flight. And specifically, both of them are in stress and both of them are in fight or flight. But for the lion, lion's mostly in fight. It's attacking. And it's got to be careful because that gazelle has sharp horns on it. And for the gazelle, it's in flight mode. It's got to run as fast as it can. So they both are in the same system, the sympathetic nervous system, both in fight or flight, but there are two flavors to fight or flight. Now, fight can be considered a seek. The lion is going after the gazelle, and the flight is an avoidance behavior. And those two are critical because, as it turns out, there are two primary behaviors of life, seek and avoid. But we rarely use those terms. But there is another set of terms that we use all the time, want and don't want. So things we want, we seek. Things we don't want, we avoid. And that's true for big decisions, for career. What do you want to do for a living? What kind of a job do you want? And marriage, are you looking for in a partner? But it's also true in small decisions. What do you want for dinner? Well, we had steak last night. Let's have chicken tonight. And let's say you're writing down a grocery list. Well, you need a pen and paper. So even for small decisions, there are things that you want, things you don't want. You want to write on a sheet of paper. You don't want to write on your pant leg. All right, back to Kilimanjaro. We've got seek and avoid going on right now. Fight or flight system. And for the two critters, they're off to the races. And depending on which one is faster, it will decide which one survives. Now, we don't have typically lions chasing us, but nevertheless, we have deadlines and bills. So the clock is the critter that's chasing us, and we can understand that sinking feeling in the stomach. But not only are we seeking things and avoiding things, the avoidance, of course, is the bills and the deadlines, but there are some things that we're seeking simultaneously. So we seek the mighty dollar, we're seeking resources. So simultaneously, we've got both sides of the fight or flight system active. We seek resources and we avoid deadlines and bills. So it's a case where the two systems can be active at the same time. Now, feelings and emotions are tied to blood changes in flow. And a balanced blood flow feels good, rest and digest. An imbalanced blood flow feels bad, fight or flight. Now, sleep deprivation causes a compromise of the immune system and caused death in rats. And for us, the compromise of the immune system could make us more susceptible to disease. So even dolphins need to sleep. Now, switching between rest and digest and fight or flight is based upon urgency. If we ate 3, 4, 5 hours ago, we might be a little hungry, but it's not as urgent as if we had not eaten for 5 or 6 days. So the more urgent the situation, the more likely we would switch from rest and digest into fight or flight. Our two primary conscious behaviors are seek and avoid. Even though we don't use those terms, we use want and don't want all the time, the equivalent terms. Most of the material in these presentations can be found in Reignite Your Creativity, Psychology of the Creative Mind, which is available as a paperback and an ebook on Amazon.com.